Rachel.
Hi,
Hi.
Uwasara. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good as well. We're just waiting for a couple of viewers to join, and then we would start off. It's lovely putting a face to the voice that I've been hearing.
I know. But I watched two of your live sessions, so
Uh, yeah, all right. So, thank you for joining the live. So, to our viewers, Uwasara is joining us from Sri Lanka. She has done her education, her undergraduation in Missouri, USA, her post graduation in Australia, right? And
yes,
then
yes.
is currently a clinical psychology trainee associated with the University of Colombo in Sri Lanka. So it's lovely to have you here with us. She has got a lot of experience working with children, adults, adolescents, and has a love for social initiatives as well. So the topic we are discussing today is healing post breakups. And this is something that has been coming up repeatedly from our viewers as well as the followers of the page, that something that they would like a little assistance with. So we just want to put out the word out there that this discussion could lead to a lot of insights, but that does not replace therapy, or it's not replace counseling. This is just to help us understand ourselves, lead to better awareness. And of course, we will be leaving you with some takeaways as to self-care. And as the title itself goes, it's the healing post breakup, so as to the way forward. So, Vasira, if you can start off with why are breakups so hard on people?
So I would also first like to thank you, Rachel, for having me for this session. And so we'll start off with why are breakups so hard. I
Yeah.
mean, so breakup, if you read or if you put it simply out there, breakup is a loss, right? So any loss is hard to cope with, just like
Mhm.
we lose someone to death or someone leaving us, like, even a temporary distance from someone. Breakup is also a type of loss. So, but the thing is, most of the time it is somewhat underrated because it's so common. It happens so much to a lot of people that sometimes the effect or the trauma that people go through after a breakup is not very much discussed. Probably that's why you got so many requests to talk about this also at this time.
Mhm.
So one of the things is one of the interesting things is there is some biological explanation behind this breakup situation. So when we are in love, when we are doing just like when we are doing something happy that makes us happy, there's a lot of feeling good hormones, you call them, right? There are so many brain chemicals. I don't want to make this a medical lesson or something, but then there are we all know that there are brain chemicals or neurotransmitters, as we call them, um, which helps with our functioning, right? So then there are the feel good hormones like the dopamines, the endorphins, and then there is the bonding chemical which is called the oxytocin. Some of you may have heard of it. So what happens is when we are in love, when we are in a romantic relationship especially, but this is also true for other relationships. Also true for other relationships. We there's a These hormones are flooding. There's a release
Mhm.
of all these brain chemicals, right?
Mhm.
And what happens when our significant other leaves us, when we lose that connection, there is a lack or there is a shortage of these brain chemicals.
Mhm.
And on top of that, to add to it, the stress chemicals or the stress, the, 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 the unwanted chemicals
Mhm.
start replacing them, right? So
Okay.
this is why it's so hard biologically. So
Mhm.
some of the articles that I read in preparation for this session also says that something that would help us heal post breakup is also to understand there is a biological explanation behind this whole uh, situation. So, what they say, what they call the withdrawal when you
Yeah,
stop taking drugs or when you stop consuming alcohol. So what happens is we go into a neurological withdrawal when we don't have those the brain chemicals being
yeah,
released. So that is one reason why breakups are hard, like, or rather the biological explanation of
basis,
it.
yeah. In addition, I
And
think, like in even in terms of if you look at what the person brought to the relationship, I think before we move on to the healing aspect, this is a time that maybe as viewers or people who even know somebody who has had a breakup, it's also about awareness as to what did this person bring to the relationship. Often at times we may have certain belief systems about ourselves, like I am not good enough, and it's a very subtle belief that we have, and maybe this person has been disconfirming the belief or
mm,
giving certain evidence to us to contrary to what we believe about ourselves, saying I'm good enough to be loved, and we start
yeah,
to have a different. So it's like after we get into a relationship, what we feel about ourselves also changes. And
yeah,
when that person leaves, I always tell my clients that it's not just a person going, but it's what he or she symbolized for you. Was it what kind of needs were being met by that particular person that now in that absence is no longer being met, or what belief about yourself that you started to think about that now you no longer believe that this person has left. So we also
yeah,
need to start having engaging in some kind of reflection about what did this person bring to the relationship, right? Because that also will help in the process of healing. As what this one person could do, we need to also start filling up that void through other
right.
systems, right? So that's one of the reasons that I also feel breakups are really hard. So it's not just the person, but the needs that he or she was satisfying. What else,
So
Uwasara?
in relation to that, I think it's also when a breakup happens, that's a lot of rejection, right? So you're being rejected by that person,
Mhm.
and I feel uh, the person who was broken up also feels like they that this rejection defines them. I mean, in relation to what you were just saying right now, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
sharing our life with someone is like we go into this whole from I talk to we talk, right? It's all about us. We want to do this. We
Yeah.
want to build this house together. We want to have our wedding like this. So we changed like our dreams, our goals, everything, our perceptions, everything
Mhm.
almost changed from I to us or we, and then
Mhm.
suddenly like we build this whole world around that, like with that person,
Mhm.
and then suddenly this person leaves and there is rejection, and then you, what do I do now? I mean, there's no more us, there's no more we here.
Mhm.
And now people struggle with a lot of identity. I think, like you said, who
Yeah.
am I now?
Mhm.
So this person meant so much, and everything I did, especially when you've had relationship for a very long time. This, I think,
Mhm.
this affects even more.
Yeah.
And you've had a relationship for a very long time, and like from childhood there are childhood lovers, from you who have become university lovers, and then continue to be lovers for a very long time, and then suddenly they don't know how they
Mhm.
can do the normal things without
Mhm.
this other person. That rejection, which that rejection leads them to identify themselves or define themselves with that, and
Mhm.
leads to a lot of like self blame and feeling inadequate
Mhm.
about themselves. So struggling with that, finding the
Okay.
me
Mhm.
who was
After the
or
us.
who was yeah,
Yeah.
that
Also,
makes breakup.
it may not necessarily, I think, the longer the relationship, yes, you have had a
Yeah,
greater time of engagement with the person, but we also have couples who say in a very short period of time have become over involved with each other, or what we call as enmeshed relationships. I've been working with some individuals who probably got into the relationship saying, this is only going to be a physical thing. I'm not going to get emotionally involved. But in the context, just by the nature of relationships, we do tend to open up, right? We do talk about our day, and with that comes our feelings about our day. So as we are opening up emotionally to another person, an emotional engagement does happen. So even
Yeah,
like a relationship as short as say 6 months could have seen you, waking up, having a call with the significant other, and then you're constantly in touch, updating each other about your day, and you're looking forward to the call that you make in the lunchtime, and then you probably meet for a date post that. So in a very short period of time, the extent to which you feel the void also indicates the extent to which you have emotionally involved in that relationship, right? And the more domains, a lot of people have actually sacrificed a lot. They call it sacrifice, right? They say, I gave up my friends, I let go of all these things that I used to enjoy, I gave up traveling, everything to spend time with her, and then she just walks off. So then you are cut off from what used to be your identity, and you've been living a life, like you said, with an us identity. And now you're back
yeah.
to just an I again. And that's
Agree.
fear of the unknown, right? So all this while you have been in a state of the known with the other person, and now you're back to a state of the unknown, where you feel like you've hit rock bottom and you have to start from scratch again, especially if you've made that person your whole life.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
think it's like
Uwasara,
it's not necessarily, sorry. I
yeah,
think it's not necessarily the time, but it's also the commitment you've had
yeah.
towards the person. I
Mm-mm.
mean, how much you've committed towards the future, and also like you said, how to the extent to which you were emotionally involved with the
Mm-hmm.
other person, an impact of how hard the breakup is going to be.
So, when you are working with individuals, what are some of the emotions that they have experienced, that they do experience, that they struggle with? What are some of
Struggle
the
with. Yeah.
emotions you see? Yeah, post a breakup.
Um, Yeah, so a lot of sadness mainly, like I mean, obviously. So a lot of sadness right after the breakup, about and confusion. I feel
Mm-hmm.
for some people there is a lot of confusion because especially if they haven't received closure, if they haven't got closure in the relationship, if they haven't got answers as to why this happened, and if the breakup was unexpected or they didn't see anything leading up to a breakup,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of confusion and sadness. And then it's and also there's a lot of fear. I think fear and anxiety about, okay, so I lost this person, and then like I've lost, maybe it could be like I've lost so many people in my past, so I lost this person as well. And then fear of not being able to get into another relationship, fear
Yeah.
of this person getting into another relationship, and with that comes
Yeah.
jealousy, envy. Who is he going to be with? Who is she going to be next with? And then loneliness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we were just discussing, when you've been so used to sharing your life and everything with this person, and suddenly there is this void, and you don't know how to function. Like basically, you don't know how to function without this person,
Mm-hmm.
and there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of isolation and loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on comes the anger. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the anger to kick in, or else it's we don't really connect with that anger until
Okay.
some point, right? Like I feel like it's more close towards acceptance, like accepting that okay, this is happening, is when we start getting angry. So interestingly, some of the research say that anger is the good feeling here when you are a post breakup. Anger is actually the good feeling because uh, most of the time, until you feel angry, you have a lot of self blame, and
Mm-hmm.
then like because of the rejection, you may try to put the blame on you and
Mm-hmm.
see and feel that you are at fault for this relationship. And like at the beginning of a breakup, most of us uh, would be desperate for this to work out again.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone, but the
Okay.
time. And fantasize about this, right? Okay, I hope this. I mean, I've been there, to be honest. I've been there. So hoping that this person will come back at one point.
Yeah.
So so all that is there. But when anger kicks in, the research says that when anger kicks in, it's when you start defending yourself. It's when you start thinking, okay, I was deceived, or there was something that was wrong there. It's not just my fault, or it's not just my responsibility. So the difficult emotions to work with, I guess, is the sadness, the confusion, and the loneliness. Because especially if you don't have a lot of social support,
Yeah.
then again it's very difficult.
And
I don't know.
there is lack of closure, right?
Yeah.
Often there's a lot more anxiety related thoughts where you try to answer your own questions because you have nobody else. Like, it's the person who needs to give those answers to you is no longer
Yeah.
present. So you start
They have
to kind of,
communication.
yeah. And healing always also talks about having no cut off contacts with the person who's now your ex. But we somehow, in the initial phase, we try and reach out to get those answers as to why this doesn't work. Strongly against the belief system that we held. And like you said, the more unprepared you were for the breakup, is likely to predict greater difficulty with the adjustment process post that, right? So if you have seen it coming, right, and you were also in line with that, saying, it's not going that great, and if it was mutual, maybe then the adjustment is better. And like you mentioned, there's also the jealousy component, and then people do engage in stalking their exes post the breakup. And the difficult emotions are depression, sadness, like loneliness. Okay, so we would probably, so these are definitely some of the emotions that individuals go through. So we are here to just say that it is normal. It's like having a loss and reacting to a loss, right? We don't have to say it's just a breakup. It's truly a loss of an intimate relationship. So there could be associated loss of trust, and like Uwasara was saying, it could lead to difficulty with adjustment in further relationships. So that all depends on your healing process itself. You must have invested a lot of time. Some people compromise on their dreams, on their day-to-day activities, on their work to try and accommodate the other person. So the first question that you need to ask yourself is, what did that person bring to the relationship? What did I have from this particular individual in the relationship that I now have lost from this particular person? And therefore, I'm going through these emotions, and it's normal. Okay, so before we go to the way forward, so we would be definitely taking up this as 2 sessions, because we have a huge list of questions that individuals sent in, and we're doing our best to cover all of them. So the first question, Uwasara, to you is how, like, okay, let me take this question. Do we have to find someone else to move on to in order to truly move on from the current relationship? So do we need another person to move from point A to point B to help us?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, as I told you yesterday when we were having a chat also, because a lot of people think when you say you need to move on, I mean, when some other people say you need to move on, they also try to imply that you need to find a better person, you need to find a different person. But and the people who are going through the breakup also may feel moving on is finding another person, which is not true, right? Moving on is healing and taking your life forward, basically. Moving on doesn't necessarily mean finding the next person for yourself, but it's also important to acknowledge that it happens. As in, when you go how to deal with breakup, if you Google how to deal with breakup, one of the tips they give is, like in the Western countries, they go out on dates. So to right? So by that, what they mean is not get into serious relationships,
Mhm.
but just on random dates. And I mean, it doesn't happen in our culture that much,
Yeah, this is
but
India, Sri Lanka here.
so it doesn't happen that much. But still, it's suggested, and also it could sometimes happen. That's what we call a rebound, right? Sometimes we quickly get attached to another person right after a breakup. But it's
Mhm.
important, I think, we acknowledge that moving on, moving forward, does not mean that we are finding a person. What it means is actually coming out of this place where we are stuck at. So,
Mhm.
like you said, what was like we have like we discussed earlier, it changes our identity, it changes our life to a whole new level after a breakup.
Mhm.
So where do I go from there? It doesn't necessarily mean going towards finding the other person,
Mhm.
the new person, but moving on, healing. Basically, I would say moving on essentially, like fundamentally, means healing yourself.
Healing
And
yourself.
then you can decide on what you want to do next. I mean, and then we have also this other group of people who say, I don't want to date ever. And then
Yeah.
there comes the other people, their support system, who come and say, you deserve better, you can find a better person. I think as people who are I mean, not the professionals, also the professionals, but just in our friendships or in our other relationships, if we are someone who's talking to a person going through a breakup, I think that's something that we should also avoid. Like
Yeah.
saying, you can do better, you can find someone else. That
Mhm.
should not be the priority here. It should be helping the person, encouraging and empowering the person
Mhm.
to heal
Mhm.
and stand up, come out of from where they are stuck at right now,
Mhm.
where they are stuck at this point.
I think
So
what you're talking about is also a lot of these, like you mentioned, the support groups that come in to try and, bad mouth this ex and say and elevate your position there, in the relationship, saying you deserve so much better, which is, in a way, it does boost the person, but also not to just take that as word of mouth, saying that's the only way to heal or that alone would heal. In fact, I find a lot of people, when they in that vulnerable state immediately after a breakup, they don't really take the best of decisions also during that time, because they're immediately seeking for someone to fill up that void, and it may not be a good decision that they make. So the distraction techniques that people could use, while it could be temporarily effective, the main focus also has to be on yourself and
yeah.
building up your identity irrespective of the other person, finding out who the I is. In fact, a lot of
Okay.
people, a lot of individuals, I feel, might have been very independent, even the most independent person prior to a relationship might lose
Yeah.
some amount of that independency and that identity during the course of the relationship, which is fine if it's serving two people's needs, mutually. But post
Yeah.
that, you would have to build up that identity again. So that's something that, like, when you don't have to truly move on to another person and use another person to define who you are, but you need to find out who you are again just by yourself. And this might involve taking some time off, some space for you to heal, being in an environment that you find safe and healing. If it is your family, great. If it's away from your family, get some time there as well. Some individuals travel. You don't have to go really far away, but at least some place which makes you
Yeah.
feel comfortable, right?
Because
So,
sometimes you can't
yeah.
connect with your family also, right? So like, something that happens in our cultures most commonly is like, relationships are not encouraged. Like romantic relationships are not encouraged during your school time or when you are studying. There's this common myth, like, you have to finish your studies, complete your studies, and then get
Mhm.
into relationships. If it's a period like that, then there is less chance of, like, sharing your feelings and getting help from your family. You actually have to run away a bit.
Yeah. Also trying to, I think we had a question which says, how do we are usually cut off from the routines that we had during the relationship. So how do we reestablish that post, um, post a breakup? I think what we do, even when we talk about depression, we always tell people, irrespective of the situation, you just stick to your regular routines no matter what. So if you used to go to a walk together with this person, and you can't just say, I'll never walk again, for the rest of my life. You still need your exercise. So if you still need to get up and eat, you still need to make a call to your family, you would still have to appear at work the next day. So the difficult period, you can't just avoid that. So that goes into the phase of, denial and just trying to skip
Yeah.
the entire. Some people just try to just skip the
They
entire
don't want
grieving
that. I
process.
think
Yeah,
people want to go through the whole grieving process. And
yeah,
I mean, we all need to acknowledge that we need to grieve because this is a loss,
yeah,
and it's important that we grieve that loss rather than avoiding it or denying it, because um, uh, that's what helps us heal. That's what
yeah.
helps us come into terms with it
Mhm.
and get back to this finding this who I was
Yeah,
before this person.
yeah.
Like, my identity. What is my identity?
Mhm.
There are questions being posted
Yeah.
also.
Finding another person is part of moving on. I think we kind of like covered that question already, saying that the moving on should be from your state of unknown within you to your state of known within you, where you
Yeah.
find yourself, not find another person per se. If that happens in the process of healing, but not for it particularly, then it's fine. Just
Yeah.
go with the flow. So we'll move on quickly to the next question, which is, how do you actually move on when you are still in love with your ex, but then he has moved on? I think,
Yeah.
okay. So to kick it off, I would say that what you probably by that time is are in love with might be the idea of that person, right?
Mhm.
More than the person itself, but the idea of having a person who contributed to your needs or who was a part of your this dual system that you had. Um, so when you are still in love, but he has moved on, right? So this also probably implies this person is in touch with that with the person who is the ex. So when you have any kind of link, whether it could be social media, it could be common friends, you are probably having more instances to remind yourself of that person constantly, right? But so there is evidence right in front of you that this person has moved on, and there might be pictures of that person with the new partner. So during this phase, just awareness of your own emotions, not saying, I don't feel this way, I can't feel this way. We are often, when we are in love with someone, right, people find it difficult to see the bad in the person when we
Yeah.
look at them through that
Yeah.
rose filters. Yes. So it's like even during the relationship, if anything bad happens, that's not something that they tend to look at. We might argue and fight in that time, but it's often at times weeks or years after the relationship that they're like, hey, I can't believe that I was ever with this particular person. So that's one of the things in terms of moving on. If you're still in love, we need to accept reality rather than run away from it and say that that person has moved on. So should I. I need to build myself up before I move forward. Right? Anything you have to add there, Uwasara?
Yes. So I think it's also uh, the other point about it. Okay, I just forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, so you were talking about accepting your emotions, right? So it's and it's also sometimes moving on is made difficult when you haven't accepted, also like when you haven't come into terms with the whole breakup. It makes it more difficult to move on
Mhm.
once the break after the breakup, right? And other thing is, when you're in love, like you need to accept, and something you need to understand, and something you need to admit, acknowledge, is that um, love and attachment, right? It doesn't just go away by just breaking up with the person, like just cutting off the
Yeah,
communication, cutting off
that's
ties, and not meeting the person, not sending the daily good morning message and asking how you are, and the numerous calls
mhm,
does not mean that this attachment and this love has ended.
mhm.
So, on you're still in love also means that you haven't fully accepted, you haven't fully come to terms with the whole breakup. And it's also okay to know that you are still in love, and you have to acknowledge it. Like you also said, it's important that you acknowledge, yes, okay, I am still in love with this person. But
Mhm.
what could help you if you want to move, when you want to move on, when you're still in love, is accepting that, realizing that love love will not love essentially will not I mean love is not just sufficient for a relationship to work.
Yeah,
Love is not only ingredient, right? It has to
yeah.
be values, the choices you make, the commitment. So all these things
Mhm.
matter, and all these things are important for a relationship to go forward. So
Mhm.
just say
I
about
think
that. So
there, somewhere there, people also have this thing that he doesn't love me, he has moved on, but I still love him and I'll make him love me, right? So
yeah,
that's that unwillingness to let go. A different perspective that, research often tells us to look at this is, if he doesn't love you right now, or if she doesn't love you right now, what makes you think that you will be happy with that person, right? When that person does come back. So if there was a need that is being satisfied, if it's maybe, I know a lot of people who feel insufficient in their day-to-day life. They feel insecure in their day-to-day life. And this other person might be the one who makes them feel that, who makes them feel secure. So you need to understand that what you're looking for is security. If you define it as only person A can give me security, then you'll probably have to wait around forever. That's where we say you
yeah,
need to build yourself up and find out what is it that is lacking. A person, it's not just one person who can fill that void, right? The needs could get filled via different ways, which actually relates what you said, Uwasara, to our next question. So we're just going to take two questions before we wind up, as we're getting a lot of questions even on the page. Um, so the next question was, why does it take some people longer to heal as compared to the others? Okay, so why does it take some people longer to heal as compared to the others? So in relation to that, some of the things that we have been discussing also is in terms of your support systems, right? If you have been completely enmeshed with the other person, if 99% of your life was that person, right? Where couples have probably, see, it's normal to have, you start introducing your friends to each other. You probably party at the same place, and you might attend the same university. So the amount of systems that are common, and then the person is, you start to have this uncomfortable situation with them, you are told that you have to cut off, then how much to cut off, right? You can't cut off 99% of your life. So the more you cut off, that's when you realize you feel more alone also. So the reasons why some people might be recovering faster or healing faster is probably that they have multiple systems also, that they've retained some part of their identity separate from this partner, right? This could also involve your future and your expectations, even if that is built all around this person, the trips that you're going to take, the children that you're going to make. I think I'm creating a poetry here, but you get the point, right? If your future and your goals are also revolving that person, and you don't have your own individual goals. I know people who have probably pushed forward their education and their career opportunities just so that they could take trips with this person, get engaged, get married. So then there's a lot of which is changing. So you don't know again who's the I without the us. So it's important in the process of healing that you create multiple systems, right? Um, it's not, you need to have a good identity relation to your work. You need to have a good identity with respect to your friends. and just you yourself as a person. Who am I? I'm a person who enjoys music. I like reading. Get back to all of that to start building up who you think you were, who you are,
Yeah.
and then look at moving forward or growing, right? So if the present you is not built, the future you, the foundation is going to be weak. Is there anything you would like to add to that, Uwasara?
Yeah, so I think so. Finding this I without the us, something to do with like something in relation to that is going back in time and reflecting on who you were before this person came into your life, right? So
Mhm.
now, when with this person you build this different identity, and then now you are trying to again figure out who am I without this person, who is this individual person. But if you can just go back in time and reflect and see who was I before this person came into my life, what was my identity back then, because
Yeah.
a breakup, like getting into a romantic relationship is a role change, like and then breaking up is again another change in roles, right? So
Yeah.
what is the difference? It might be helpful to go back in time and see. And one thing I wanted to add to the part about moving on is
Mhm.
also don't not forcing yourself to move on. I think we need to give it time. I wanted to add this before. Sorry, I'm just saying it now, Rachel.
Yeah.
Just accepting that we all need time, and each of us is different. Our attachment style, so something that determines how fast or how slow we heal from a breakup, is also related to how our attachment
Mhm.
styles have been childhood. Like, so if we've
Yeah.
always had secure attachment styles and all that, it'll be easier for
Mhm.
us to move on after a breakup. But you shouldn't force yourself to move on, saying I can't just be stuck here. But just take it slow, go through the process of grieving, mourn the loss, and
Yeah.
go through all that emotions, accepting that this is how I feel, this is what I feel. And like we discussed earlier, it's normal to feel all these things. These are
Yeah.
universal emotions that all people feel after a breakup.
So we also had, so along these lines, we had a question saying when we are feeling all these emotions, it just feels increasingly lonely during that time, just sitting all by yourself in the room and feeling all those intense emotions. So we can also, as a way forward, you could have this, this emergency contact list, your group of close friends who are not there to necessarily pep you up and start like a cheerleading squad, but who could be there to hear you out, maybe offer you a different perspective, and take you out and try to reintegrate you into the community that you did belong to before you got into this relationship. You could still go out and enjoy a cup of coffee. There is nothing which says that you shouldn't enjoy things anymore. So often when we fail to have the other person to be angry too, we also have a tendency to turn that anger inwards at ourselves. How could I have been so stupid to get into
Yeah.
this relationship? Why didn't I see this happening? So this is
Mm.
all actually tending to punish ourselves more rather than actually healing, which means a lot more self-compassion and self-care during the time when we need to be our best friends, not our worst
Yeah.
enemies, and hurt ourselves in the process, right? So Uwasara and I will definitely, we'll try and have another session to deal with some of the other emotions that is expected after a breakup. So we did talk about some things like jealousy. We got a couple of questions along that. So we're not going to venture too much into that, but just Uwasara, as a takeaway, right? Could you just tell our viewers some ideas or tips as to self-care? What is it that they can do post a breakup to help the healing process or initiate the healing process?
Process. So I think the positive side, I mean, I'm not saying breakups are good, but it's also a learning. Everything in life is a learning experience, right? So this is a good time for us to do a lot of self-reflection, identify ourselves, what happens. So like if you read research, it also says this is a point for growth. Like breakup is a point for growth for a lot of people to understand, figure out what went wrong, where, and all of that. and as a person, what you were contributing to this relationship, and in terms of finding yourself. So, like, it's, I wouldn't say it's like, it's kind of a resilience that some of the research say that people grow after such an experience because of the amount of reflection that they engage in order to um, come to terms with your own self and identify yourself, right? So some of the tips I would suggest is forgiving yourself if you are doing a lot of self blame. That is very important. Bring the focus back. Like, I think this is what we both of us have been saying from the beginning. Bring the focus back to yourself. It is a very good time for you to bring the focus back to yourself. Um, and don't push hard, don't be too harsh on yourself. It's a good time to take more care of yourself. Take more care of yourself, pay more attention to yourself, and indulge in yourself. Look for something that you've always wanted to do, and try to answer the questions of, okay, we've been doing, like, I've been doing this with my partner all this time, but do I really, is that what I really wanted to do? Like, okay, I was watching action movies with him, but is it the kind of movie I really want to watch, or was I just watching it to make him happy, and so that our relationship works and we don't have to fight over which movie to watch when we are together. So, indulging yourself and figuring out what you really want to do. And also, I think forgiving your ex. I mean, I know some of the viewers may not agree with me on this, but it's not to excuse your ex of what he or she has done, but it is for our sanity. It is
Yeah.
for our own. It's for us to heal. It's to help us heal. And this forgiving our ex, no matter what he or she has. I mean, it's not easy to forgive if they have hurt us so much, but it also helps us to come to terms with it and let go of it.
Yeah.
So forgiving, I mean, you don't have to force yourself to do it, but it eventually, that anger towards our ex, or all these negative emotions that we have because of the breakup, is not going to do us any good in the end. So forgiving and letting go of it is good. And get, like you also said, getting time for yourself, and understanding that it's not the same for everyone, right? It's not the same for all people. The rate at which we heal, the rate at which we may find the next partner, is not going to be the same. Depends. It probably circumstances, and even there's a genetic basis for the rate we heal. So, like, I was talking about the bonding brain chemical, right? So there are receptors where these bonding chemicals go and bind to, and if we have if when there's a deficiency of these receptors or something, then we might heal faster, apparently.
Yeah.
So there's research on this, very interesting thing.
Yeah.
So,
So the important thing, like you mentioned, is forgiving yourself, right? And I think forgiving your ex was an excellent suggestion in order for us to let go of the anger as well, because the anger is a very negative emotion. Whether we feel it towards someone else or towards ourselves, it's not a pleasant energy to live with. Right? So it's important we transform that energy into something a lot more positive, which can be self-love and self-care, and a lot more insight into what did that relationship actually bring to me, that I got so strongly attached, that I got so strongly dependent on that. Did it help me feel better about how I look, or did it help me feel that I'm worth it? And it's important to direct that and realize that you have other resources around you also to make you validate those needs that you have, right? So even like I've had some couple individuals come in and say that they might get calls the whole day around from friends checking in on them and parents checking in on them, and they have a good work career as well, but they still feel worthless, right? That's probably because they define their sense of worth only from one person, whereas there's so much evidence around them to show that it's because they are worth it that so many people are being connected to them. So this is a time also to widen your perspective from that narrow perspective that you had only towards the him and the me, or the her and the me, to me and the rest of the world, right? And accommodate more perspective and more, and grab, taken more opportunities to grow yourself as a person during this time. So it's not a breakup, it's a build up from this forth on. So we would definitely put out a post about our discussion today. Do keep watching our live sessions. A big thank you to all our viewers, and thank you, Uwasara, for coming in today. Joining us all the way from Sri Lanka despite your busy schedule. We would be really honored to have you back with us to discuss further on these lines. We have really about 20 questions more along the lines of breakup. So thank you one and all for your support as well. We will catch you again shortly. Thank you so much. Thank you, Uwasara.
Bye.
You have the